Okay. Is anybody not ready? All right. Time starting. Now, first on framework, whiteness is arbitrary and based on the exclusion of others. Full constructs based off of things like certain phenotypic features, while this categorization does not naturally happen. You can see this in the warrant for Ozawa v. US and Baga v. DS that demonstrate a legal precedent in the shifting of definition of whiteness in order to exclude POC. Two is going to be that race has never been about the color of a person's skin. It's always been about what the color represents. Race is semiotically constructed as the connotations that we place on it that fuel action. Demarcation of color on the skin is simply a signifier for another hidden meaning. Warrant one here is that the war on drugs proves. Nation's policy chief literally said that we knew we couldn't make it illegal to be black, but getting the public to associate blacks with heroin and then criminalizing both heavily, we could vilify them. And warrant two is that whiteness previously excluded Irish, Jewish, and Mormon. Now it doesn't because of cultural and social sins. C is going to be that semiotic orders produce structure and condition with different pragmatic social effects. Race and semiotics play an important role in our world building and knowledge production. Since structures were built off the concept of race, it is act arbitrary to enforce it and constantly recodify itself, making it impossible to question. The warrant here is redlining built off of racialized assumptions about neighborhoods and the impacts of such. Still seeing today. Two is going to be that racial semiotics fuels imperialism and neocolonialism. Whiteness serves as the prereq for the removal of indigenous people labeled as savage. There needed to be a justification for the removal of the act of genocide before it could take place, which makes the rhetorical demarcation of trace a prior question to violence. Warrant one is going to be that the difference in features allows European bodies to label indigenous as other, which justified enslavement. Three is going to be both structurally unfair to Chicano bodies. One is going to be that Mexico is a product of Spanish tech-con U.S. imperialism, no longer the indigenous state of Anahuac. Post-Spanish tech-con Mexico was later subjected to U.S. imperialism, which paved way to U.S. neoliberal control over its sectors today, especially economically, was leading to the intensification of national oppression against the Chicano body. Chicano workers became a significant sector of the working class, but they were still brutally exploited and cheated for their labor. The haunting of Guadalupe Hidalgo's betrayer. This is a monopoly like the Rockefellers that made the Bureaucracy made Mexican self-determination impossible. B is going to be linguistic terrorists, post-colonial semiotics. Our native tongue are controlled through the privilege of procedural fairness, predictability, and limits. We go through cultural crucifixion when speaking our own foreign tongue, told our language is wrong. How hard is it to speak English, huh? This is the imposition of English as the oppressor's language. It attempts to dominate and disparage Chicano ways of speaking as deficient. This shaped the humanity of the subject until I am free to write bilingually to switch codes that always having to translate or have to accommodate to English speakers rather than having them accommodate to me. My tongue will be illegitimate. C is going to be cultural imperialism and lost identity situated between two worlds. We must take on the burden of defining ourselves in relation to multiple reference groups. My FAFSA says I'm white, but to you, I'm not, right? I am the classification in which society puts me underneath. We live under a neo-colonial form of imperialism. This has given the Chicanas the appearance of self-determination, but it's simply an instance of threat control. 4 is going to be that imperialism, neo-colonialism seeps into all areas of life, including debate. As members of society, we have grown within these arbitrary racial norms. We bring these values into debate. Like rhetorically, we still reference the Chicano or Latin body by Hispanic, which is steeped in colonialist origin, or Nathan Latinx in the name of woke, which is simply a grammatical myth and was employed even when Latina exists. Language matters and we ignore it. 5 is going to be political games arbitrary. Policies were designed by the white game maker. They promised us that, hey, if we stayed quiet, stayed complicit, stopped speaking Spanish, we could have the chance of enfranchisement. Mentiras! Politics was never created for the non-white body, and they mocked us when we tried. Elite has forced us to play by their political game and gave us hollow hope. This is seen in Chicano LULAC program, which made us become a white race, and the reason why my speeding ticket says white on it. Links is going to be that one is going to be society and debate. Our society's value structure, which is perpetuated in debate, was fundamentally constructed upon the semiotics of race created by the white game makers' hegemony. This in turn produces a system that society accepts and embraces the detriment of Chicano other. 2 is going to be academia feeds itself off of imperialist and neo-colonial knowledge production. The resolution forces us to do this harmful academia through affirmation of it and its harmful action. The warrant here is going to be like textbooks in schools through false narratives like Columbus. And 3 is going to be that the topic specifically demands that we place others in harm's way. We risk the nation and people of Iran, especially in a way that subject those people and other Muslims to the violent colonial backlash of the U.S. and allies. Look at this quote. Look at what Israel is doing to the people of Gaza. Iran building weapons that would do nothing but endanger a massive backlash from global colonial powers and completely remove the mass to enact full genocide. Israel's bunker busters would fly with nuclear tips immediately after Iran began construction of any side in the U.S. and back them up and jump them to finish the job. The speed is going to be that the topic demands we speak for others. We are not Iranian, we do not live in that nation, and we do not have those experiences. Why speaking for others is dangerous, where one speaks from affect the meaning and truth of what one says, and persons from dominant groups who speak for others are often treated and mess with the legitimacy and credibility of the subjugated speakers. The resolution would be no different. Next on to impacts. One is going to be the endless imperialist and neocolonialist violence. Without putting a stop to harmful structures that prioritize whiteness, we will never see an end to imperialism in every country south of the Rio Grande. This is going to lead to widespread structural violence, as each neocolony is designed to have their resources extracted, and therefore will never have economic self-determination, which leads to massive poverty and no class mobility, who do not give in to imperialism, which creates a psychological disposability where individuals feel like a sacrifice to the empire. Two is going to be cultural genocide. Look at this round. I am already speaking a language forced onto me and my ancestors by a state that robbed my family of my land, culture, and sovereignty. And even when I speak Spanish, I'm classified as a no sabo kid because of how chalky my Spanish is, because I was told to assimilate to be seen as American, just as Aztecs have to learn Spanish to be seen as Spaniards are simply legitimate. And this occurs in forced topical debate. It's going to produce structural unfairness to Chicano students who had to create our identity. Cultural genocide is going to be the death of a human that transcends physical, and therefore death that lasts a lifetime, causing the pain of non-resistance for every second we are forced to toil as slaves to the empire. The alternative is going to be to vote ask to achieve conocimiento and reach the patna in order to effectively deconstruct whiteness. Solvency. One is going to be conocimiento. Conocimiento is the awareness gained by the experience. It uniquely liberates and unites the marginalized to create social and educational change, critically transforming the oppressed and the oppressor. It is created through testimonio, which is first or third person narratives that embody historical and social lived experiences. Conocimiento allows us to understand how we respond to and heal from oppressive experiences. Conocimiento of different pedagogies can help educators furnish their students with necessary dialogue to discuss difficulties borderline dwellers face. This looks like personal experiences and educational research, cultural academic knowledge. Two is going to be the patna, which is la tierra de la transformación, and the cuarto word meaning in between the spaces, the liminal space where immigrants travel from past to present and realize that the conditions remain the same. And here is where awareness and responsiveness happens, and one seeks to improve the existing conditions. In the patna, we weave ourselves into one, and we find our identity. The patna is a secure third place of pain. Strategies not only for survival and resistance, but also for agency. The Chicano movement was literally started by those who reached the patna, and our napaderas that are agents to produce conocimiento and bridge the gap between here and the frontline. Three is going to be debate, knowledge production. Fiat is illusory. Fiat doesn't do anything, but knowledge production does. But knowledge production alone is insufficient without an examination of the semiotics used to make sense of the world, make choices, and describe impact from that knowledge. And academia, debate utilizes harmful academia that is drenched in white hedge, but we're going to break that role of the act. So I, the Nepatnera, express this knowledge through the K to provide the listener with the conocimiento of the injustices committed to the Chicano people. This is my testimonio.
I should already have all text.
Yeah. Sorry. How do you define the Chicano people?
Chicano is a word created by those who resided and those who have ancestors from Mexico and residing in America.
Are impacts in round or impacts structural?
But so one of them is going to be like endless imperialist violence. Obviously, like Chicano people have suffered this, and a lot of borderland dwellers do. The second one is cultural genocide, which does happen in round and does happen to this person themselves.
Yeah, what's the differential between in-ground cultural genocide and like structural cultural genocide?
I mean, do you mean like writ large, or do you mean like to the individual?
Like, if you're gonna go for in-rounds, like in-round solvency, what's the difference between in-round cultural genocide and out-round?
I mean, in-round cultural genocide, this is like the most proximal impact, because already through the through my testimony that I give through this K and the linguistics and rhetoric that we use in
So
debate,
structural genocide ought to come second?
we're saying that both of these are going to continue happening if we do not,
Structural genocide occurs because of the knowledge we produce in spaces like debate and in academia writ large. Any challenge to that knowledge production is a way in which we can resolve the structural violence outside of the space, but the most proximal impact being the cultural genocide that we face here in the space.
What does Nipata mean?
Nefagma is it's a space, it's a Nahuatl word meaning in between the space. And it's where immigrants or people who find themselves in between two identities and two cultures or whatever, find themselves travel from past to present and realize that with time, oppressive conditions remain the same.
Yeah, I just want to follow up for the speech because I don't know what that word means, Ian, so I'm sorry to translate that for me. But cool. Is everyone not ready? How many off? Maybe two off.
Two off is one of them wrong.
Third, yeah, if that indicates anything.
Yeah. Alright. Ready?
Anyone not?
I'm ready.
Interpretation of the PMC, the AFME only guard office will have that hypothetical implementation of resolutional action. The PMC, the AFME only guard office will have that implementation of resolutional action by violations. They don't guard office from components of mental and reaching the FAFA standards. One, predictability. 8, unpredictable affirmatives move prep time leading to lower quality of clashes. We lose all our reach to injury prep resolution. So stasis point, and that is for discussion. That is key to effective deliberation and preparation, key to decision making, and absence skills that are internal into any affirmative policy. If you believe testimony is uniquely good, 2, limits resolutions are vetted by topic committees to ensure somewhat balanced ground on both sides. Both extra affirmatives can be extremely asked just by truths and one equals one or genocide is bad. It destroys educational class B. They force us to be for any methodology ever, which is possible for the negative and unfair, which is never having any specific answers to the app, and 0 clash against the PMC. 3, topics to the class, always on time frame, topic only round for 1 round, unique opposite of the negative that's lost, which I debate lost, you read on negative and get the benefits of the K while also getting this opposite education. You were neg against it, you didn't read this, why not? Which means you have an competitive advantage to read it right now for jurisdiction A, the NPDA bylaws and permanent rules specified in section 7B, that if at the end of the day the judge believes that the proposition team that has supported and successfully defended the resolution, they will be declared the winner, otherwise the opposition will be declared the winner of the which is an independent TKO to the F. If they don't defend the resolution, then they lose the round. You assigned an agreement. This is why you ought to uphold this. Means you probably aren't able to judge other rounds, so you believe you can create an impact in other future rounds. Means you hold the line here. 5, and inward term politics deferral obviously turns it inwards from their critical theory, which removes their responsibility from real world actions. Then see the political terminal response on cases, then changes in the real world focus on challenging balance rather than changing the real world that we live in, and always referring to some other act or action to lead the charge and change the test goal. We'll get to that on links about the why academia and value modification. 6 is the TVA. They can read their affirmative methodology, reject white status structure that links decolonization, self-determination by indigenous peoples, specifically by a separate actor such as Iran was a direct opposition to U.S. imperialism. Iranian Middle Eastern groups have the same racial problem where they illegally classified as white, but existed in between after reading real school over arguments, ideas, what is it? It's conocimiento, enlightenment are unique to Chicano ideology, so being in Eastern religions such as Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, they still solve the impacts voters want to use their priority to establish rules of game before you play the hand apply their affirmative framework. Here's the question whether the next can engage with the affirmative and a jurisdiction. You don't have the ability to vote for a non-topical affirmative. Then that we're going to see there's 2 procedural fairness. English structural fairness exists. Equal speech times assure some level of procedural fairness. You don't have a brief for structural fairness, but we have a brief for procedural fairness. At least a collapse debate. Debate was fair. So one of asked obviously the impossible debate collapses over internal. And if you believe that you change the debate space and changing the debate space, you need good. You have the debate. You need the debate space to exist before you can change it, which means you solvency next procedural fairness. Classification, only education, unique to debate comes for case testing truth of the PMC means they can't leverage case against the DA, especially true poly without charge cards just by clash how we verify whether or not your assertions are true. So the clash can't access your solvency means if we would link presume all PMC true claims false to vote negative presumption and can be interpreted for reasonability, can be interpretation best way to weigh offense, defense in the round, reasonability is arbitrary enforced intervention as well as harm judge adaptation, which especially key right now because there are 5 of y'all. Next is going to be T's kind of methodology. We present an alternate model for how we should resist down structure of power, which means the effect turns so don't link it to its office on case flow. Next off. Framework 1 ontology is part question of knowledge production, the affirmative ontology, enforces epistemology now. Modes of being or socialized or adopted without being consciously aware and knowing mythology, social culture, social life, distance, standing practices, how close or distant we are from features of public spaces, tell us about how our culture influences our understanding of social concepts, to interrogating ontologies, key to understanding how we exist in the world. Ontologies place how we comport ourselves towards our projects of being in the world. Ontology place how I approach being a debater, college student, and being Chicano. This shapes of policy making, the efficacy of policy actions depending on understanding how bodies exist in the world in relation to other bodies and cultures, i.e. Chicano and La Raza, without a formal understanding of our relationships between bodies and their surrounding policy action will always be doomed to failure. 3, rejection is pragmatic. Rejection is key. Pragmatism is bread and butter for debate only through rejection, exacerbation of colonial understanding. There be an avenue to unlearn coloniality and politics, try for any method be honest solutions, but for the other message post the world only replicates error and leads to serious policy failure. And the criticism is a research method that this reform prior to the action of the PMC. The criticism is to vote negative to avoid the critique. This means there can be no permanent sequential basis links. 1, the necessity to go for a ballot with comprehension means you chose to translate to English, however, because the imperial nature of the English language, that choice was never when you had colonization of your tongue was done before this around again agency non-existent, probably reason why you create a hollow hope in this specific round to the construct of the final or state that you recommend overclose the creation of the space was only necessary because people colonize the place we live. Working in the middle should be the choice, not necessity. As a choice to build a border was taken away from me in the first place means there absolutely will always be covered by the role of colonizer and constructor of the space. Next is the ass imagination when you tell the world will be the alternative, create new specters of the future will never be this lost. Future always haunts the present. The alternative purpose imagination of the world of the alternative represents the active negation of the present and the past. When you try to go back to a point of like the 1700s of the Nahuatl language and the Aztec people, probably reason why by negating both the present and structural violence against the Aztec people and for affirmative aspects itself from intersecting most violence that appear through spectral analysis. In fact, One, static ontology is spectral. Attempts to evade the spectral spectrality makes their location evident turns to these acts of violence to the U.S. intervention in Iran after Iraq after 9/11 was viewed as just reactive because they were unaware of U.S. destabilizing involvement in the region prior to 9/11, and U.S. used it as a facade to master desire to spectral violence, proliferate genocidal logics, and pressure the root cause of authorization operate via projection of spectrality on violence that violates norms of kinship and condition them as ontologically deadly genocide, just similar to colonial expansion that killed 56 million people in Americas. Alt. Vote negative to reject the static political ontology of PMC and to endorse spectral politics. Vote negative to reject the static political ontology of PMC and to endorse spectral politics. One, spectral politics discloses the politics and orientation to its own past politics temporalities, prerequisites for liberatory discussion. Pedagogy must reclaim the past instead of orienting a hypothetical futurity that subordinates history's ability of Western politics based on evading the specter of historical laws, monument classing, events such as Vietnam's genocide endemic to the very same ontological logic the after uses to create a contradiction that opens the political terrain to observatology, such as anti-war movements and student movements and Chicano movements. Following reason why these contradictions, using these contradictions instead of running away from them is uniquely good to creating a mode of entry for ontological critique is the first step to deconstructing Western metaphysics against all constant otherization. Ontological reorientation is the only mode for rejecting our drive for hegemony, disclosure to reality beside ontology. It avails historical points of creating a new dominant order, logos of truth, and solves the referring to modes of Chicano logics and ontology uniquely could be good because it actually represents the understanding nature of a spectral analysis of how the Chicanos were had structurally armed. Term fails for entirety false competitive firms explicitly conceal what history has logically from our contingent of logic to the benefit of the actions will justify death. Go to the case. Framework one, whiteness might be arbitrary, but the political position of whiteness is always going to be inevitable. Look to what in the Pongo, what is the middle of is always going to be between the formation of whiteness and blackness within the political and any in between, or is going to be any construction that it still operates under this narrative, which means you still bite back into forms of whiteness. If you believe that is bad, that's going to be independent turn is reason why to vote them down. Yeah. Anything else right on the framework there? Cool. Go to the links, go to the one academia turn back modification, and you lead to a form of wounded pattern politics. You always need a white judge approval for a reason why you're always going to be bound to the white gaming ship, even if you believe that debate can be changed, it's always going to be bound by whiteness, which means you always buy back into this, which next is going to be on the third link, you say the topic of forcing you to speak for others is what it exalts because you're trying to speak for all Chicano, you're speaking for my identity, which means you take my agency away. Probably reason why you just vote negative right here. If you believe that there is sort of a Chicano choice, you vote for the negative of my identity, which is always going to be proximal in this round, which means that it's probably going to wash any form of proximal impacts for in round cultural genocide because you have taken my choice away from me. That's already happened. That's your representation. That's binding. As well as you always also misrepresent like speakers such as Maria Full that stated that in the Pont law or the middle is already happening, is inevitable for all Chicanos, which means that this quote was solving right now in your interpretation of it. There being a brink in this quote is probably the reason why you bow them down because representation is only going to be harmful to actual, not actual actors, but activists happening outside of this round. Probably the reason why it decks out around solvency as well. Next is going to be yeah, they have impact turns to topical debate. We say engagement is a kind of methodology to understand real formations of political and structural harms. That is uniquely good. You can do that answer on the case by the T debate. Go to the alternative. One, Chicano movement leads to forms of cosmic race and transitional race, like the Lhasa harms indigenous people because they only see it as only having half of the transcendental race because you had to have a mix of being indigenous and or black and being white.
We did it.
Sorry, Sean.
My handwriting's gonna be like atrocious, so.
Oh, it's all good.
Right. The alt is vote negative to reject the static political ontology of the PMC and to endorse spectral politics. And then the interpretation is the PMC or the affirmative may only garner offense from the hypothetical implementation of the resolutional action. Ready? Right. We're gonna go ahead and start now.
What's your definition of specters?
Spectre, specters are events that have happened in the past and events that will happen in the future that always affect action that we take today. Our articulation is that the affirmative tries to separate from some specters, such as utopianism of going back to the formation of Nabatla, which is formed in the Nahuatl language without, while recognizing that whiteness has overstructured it, but stating that it can be overcome without recognizing the failures that have happened in the past means your form of ontology is static.
So we endorse spectral politics by not acknowledging certain history.
No, it's by acknowledging all history. We just say you oversee or look over the failures of Chicano movements in the past.
Because we don't acknowledge the failures of Chicano movements of the past?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the order is going to be F and then T and then counter criticism in the order of framework, links, impacts, all. All right, is anyone not ready?
Oh, wait.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Sorry,
Once you get a sip of water.
Yeah, word again?
Yeah, so it's gonna be case in the order of framework, links, impacts, all, and then off case in the order of T framework, and then counter criticism with all at top. I mean, no, with framework at top and then the all at the bottom. Right. Is anyone not ready? All right. This is going to be a really easy ballot for UTT HS in this round because they conceded that that whiteness is going to be semiotically constructed, which means whiteness is not always going to be inevitable unless we allow these constructions to build themselves inside of the base space in academia, which spills over which are large. Whiteness is always going to be created through demarcations of meaning, where you're going to demarcate the black body through like the war on drugs. So it's Nixon's policy administration. They conceded these words, which show how demarcation shows how we value an individual's worth, and we create these demarcations to like construct like blackness, whiteness, and all these different races. This is what world building looks like inside of semiotics, which means semiotics is always going to be a prior question to understanding ontology, because we can only understand ontology through language, which means if language builds our ontology and our meaning of who we are and how we identify, that means that semiotics is always going to come first. So deconstructing semiotics is always going to be a prior question in this round, which means you're always going to be voting on the affirmative because it try or die to solve the deconstruction of whiteness through semiotics. Now, so second of all, you can extend across that linguistic theorism is going to be through the procedural rules of the debate. They try to tell us how to be procedural. This is going to be inherently bad because it doesn't allow. It means that we're forced to code switch, especially inside of this round today, and it doesn't allow us to speak in different tongues inside of the debate space without being like told we're not good or we can't like do it inside of the space. But even on that, we're going to be moving on to the links. They say that we have to get the white judge approval, and that this is going to be we're going to say this is always going to be inevitable. There's always going to be white judges, but any risk that we solve this construction of whiteness is probably a reason why we still solve semiotics, and how academia is always going to like how academia right now still constructs whiteness through semiotics, and they're justifying a demarcation interpretation of the others. This spills over inside of like textbooks that whitewash history. This means that you're always going to be like voting on a risk of deconstructing whiteness. But second of all, they say that we're speaking for all Chicano identities. Literally, you can extend from the all. This is the testimony of the PMC. This is not all identities inside of this space. We are saying that this is our, this is specifically Leilani's testimony inside of the PMC of what she experiences inside of this debate space and what it is like for Chicano individuals. But even with that, we're going to extend across that. They say that like Nepal is already happening inside of the status quo. Cool. It might be happening a little bit, but it's not. We're not getting agency or self-determination from it right now because we are not providing testimonies in this space, which means that knowledge production in this space is still going to be uniquely bad because it means that this resolution is like trying to tell us like the experiences of the Iranian individuals and why they should build fucking nukes. This is wrong because we can give testimony to that, but we can give testimony to the individual experiences we have inside of the space, which means neocolonial violence is always going to be inevitable as long as the construction of whiteness through academia and the resolution continues to exist. This independently turns the entirety of their counter criticism because as long as whiteness still exists and is constructed semiotically, which gains our understanding of ontology, that colonialism is going to be inevitable because on the framework they conceded that whiteness fuels imperialism and colonialism, which means the probability that we solve colonialism better than negative is going to outweigh on like it's going to outweigh on probability. Second of all, we're going to say a cultural genocide. They read a TVA. They tell us that we have to assimilate enough inside of the space to be ordered to garner any offense. This is going to be quite literally the reason of why we're experiencing cultural genocide inside of academia right now. Probably a reason why the affirmative is right in our analysis of why testimonies are going to be so critical. But even on that, on the alternative, they literally conceded 100% solvency, which means you've already signed your ballot here because not only were you correct question, but we're also going to be saying that conocimiento was always going to solve. They say we're half race and that we are only half of Orientalism. We're going to say that race is always going to be a semiotic construction. They conceded that, which means any risk that a third space challenges semiotic construction through agency and strategies of resistance that are developed, which they conceded. It's probably a reason why our alternative is always going to outweigh that of negative. You can also extend that we produce better knowledge production because field is always going to be illusory and that academia is going to be key because we effectively deconstruct whiteness inside of this round. On to the D. This is going to be an independent voting issue. First violation, they use language as a way for the Chicano body and identity to assimilate itself into the procedural rules of debate by reading a topical version of the affirmative that, first of all, doesn't even solve because we're going to say that a whole country can't give a testimony about the individual's experiences, which means that you are still telling us that we have to assimilate through backing these Iranian experiences, which we have no idea about, which is demarcating of Iranian individuals because we play them like they were a game. That's fucked up. But even with that, we're going to say multiple DAs are going to be prove why all their offense is going to be wrong. First of all, we're going to say hollow hook this that they use topicality as a means of enfranchisement in this space, telling us that incremental policy and procedural rules being upheld is more important than having our voices heard. That the only way we can be heard is if we do it within the rules of the white man's game. They conceded that debate is a white man's game. The procedural rules were created through colonialist knowledge production that existed before debate existed, which means that you are always going to be voting that we're your prior question. The impact of this only promotes neo-colonial education and fairness for the white man, ensuring that Chicano identity and other identities in between continue to be subverted by the white man's gain. This ensures that unequal access to unique perspectives of education and fairness, and without agency and self-determination, fairness and education education means absolutely nothing inside of this space. But even with that, we're gonna say that this is the Guadalupe Hidalgo all over again. This is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where you tell us what is best and fair for you, and then you go violate it the next round, where you read a critical affirmative just like everyone else in this fucking space. This means that that's a debate, infinitely regressive debates. That's only continues white man's game of fairness and education when it benefits you inside of this round. This is strategically bad because it only allows the construction of whiteness further, which means fairness is going to be terminally non-unique. But even with that, we're going to say knowledge production, or we're going to outweigh cross-apply the framework point forward, pointing out how by using debate are with new colonial language and use the language. We need that knowledge is a negative asset to produce or being taught. Only issues a certain space can be reached, that agency is never able to be determined, which means that we have no access to the education that they're trying to go for inside of this round. Even with that, they're literally the border logic. They tell us they tell us to know the rules or go home. This sort of legalism that justifies border walls and Trump immigration policies. This means your interpretation is probably a mass deportation of identities that aren't supported in this space. This means that you're always going to be voting on this because, well, like first of all, you shouldn't make us read an interpretation that links to all of your offense. But if you really want one counter interpretation, the affirmative should affirm the topic or deconstruct whiteness when they feel appropriate and comfortable to do so. Any other interpretation boards of the debater to affirm whiteness when they feel the topic was so it with a link to 100% of all the options we read in the PMC, which you consider, which means this is probably not a priority because not only does it TVA link because it makes us like replicate the experiences of someone we don't know, but it's also probably a reason like you promote colonialist knowledge inside of the debate and fairness. This means you should probably vote the team down. They willingly decided to replicate the harms of linguistics by reading interpretation, telling us then upon how to engage. This is coded for enfranchisement. That.
Wait, they say punishments in Islam can't solve, that's not our testimony, but.
Yeah, but
still
they say
there's-
Buddhism and Islam can't solve. That's not our testimony. Testimony is what's solved, but you tell us we can't give it inside of this space, which is inherently going to be bad. On to counter criticism. Once again, you can cross-apply that war is going to precede ontology because we are ontology. We're literally giving our testimony about our worldview of how we are viewed inside of the world. This means that semiotics is probably always going to come first because we have to understand our worldview through language, and language is always going to matter, which means we turn the entirety of the critique. They say that translation is going to be a choice. We're going to be saying it's not. We're forced to assembly. Otherwise, you're not going to understand anything we say because the white man's game have been around for too fucking long. This means that it's incredibly non-unique and there's no offense here. But second of all, we're going to say they say like we are like bad for spectrality. This is like a generic link. We're going to say that if anything, we're discussing the past experiences of Chicano as well as like the ongoing experiences and what we can do in the future. But even with that, the alternative, we're going to say perm do both. We're going to say there's an agency dissent. Without the perm, we don't get agency or self-determination, which means that you don't solve the Chicano identity or any of the affirmative. Yeah, you'll give us a second. You want to do the the inter
Yeah.
or
I'll do that.
you want the violation for the IBI?
Or actually, yeah.
Yeah, and then the prime. Yeah, my handwriting is also atrocious. I mean, I was just probably both. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wait, no, get the counter. I'll get the counter interpretation. Okay, I
Yeah,
was like,
I'm putting that because they also wanted them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me get the counter. Oh my god. No, yeah, just leave it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whiteness.
Leave it in the intern. This is the.
For sure. Yeah. It's gonna be counter.
Counter, yeah, should affirm or deconstruct whiteness and fuel for community.
Would the writing of an RFD or a ballot be a procedural rule?
I mean, it's one of the procedural rules.
Cool,
Yeah,
thank you.
right.
Okay. Order is gonna be
T. F. And then K. Everybody ready? Yeah. Okay. On TT is a conditional test of the counter methodology. This is conceded, which means that it's like similar advocacy status to a K. We say it's conditional. The method is probably, but testing from all sides is uniquely good, allows us for better advocacy testing. Weigh this education against the representations because it allows you to refute and bolster solvency. Means that T reps aren't binding and we still claim F representations are. Means that we only have to answer the IVI. Extend that assimilation at some point is inevitable because assimilation to procedural rules is inevitable, like trying to get a ballot. But secondly, they only give two responses. One, they say that when they say that assimilation doesn't solve, that's not going to be like an offensive reason to vote neg. Then they say that the TVA doesn't solve because we can't represent a whole country, but they've also conceded the point of the TVA so that it can spill over to like other identities as well, such as Chicano identities, which means that like the TVA could still function. That goes conceded, which means that you reject the IVI. Okay. That being said, drop the T sheet, go to the F. Conceding whiteness is inevitable turns any chance for semiotic reorientation. The spectrum of political ontology is framed between the endpoints of whiteness and blackness. This means that you can only go as far from whiteness, but still within the political constructions. There is no third space when you concede. This deck solvency creates hollow hope. That's a dissad with proximal impacts to Chicanos in debate because you literally ended your claim on Leilani's testimony that it describes the Chicano experience in debate. Hold them to these representations means harms a hollow hope for all Chicanos in the space. This means that even if you do get solvency through Leilani's testimony, it also means that you're triggering like the link as well by like rejecting Max's like agency as well, which means that at worst it means that there's terminal no solve in the affirmative because we're getting like a benefit and a negative in both directions with no like analysis as to which one's worth, which means that like the affirmative is probably going to be like net neutral, or it means that it's going to be net worse because the relink is going to be far worse than the actual link itself because you knew what you're coming into the round with, and you're perpetuating this violence against other debaters in the debate space, which probably means if you read this in future rounds, you would like have a much higher rate of like pushing other Chicano debaters out of the debate space while only being able to like benefit Leilani. Whiteness is an inevitable semiotic concept. It constructs the uniqueness of the perception of La Raza and cosmic race. We don't say that you advocate for this, but it's perceived as that. This means that you harm indigenous people in debate because under a concept of whiteness spectrum, they cannot be in the middle because they're only indigenous and not white. This is the day that goes conceded. Anything else? Go to the or go to the next. Okay. That being said, you go to the neg. One on ontology, they say that semiotics is going to be preceding ontology because it's the worldview of language, but they've conceded reasons from the framework about why ontology comes first. This is going to be the second argument that interrogating ontology is key to understanding how we exist in the world because it displays how we comport ourselves towards our projects and being in the world, which explains like how Max, approaches being like Chicano, a debater and a college student, which also shapes like the way that we orient ourselves. But also they can see the link that like there's still a static representation of ontology, and even if like there is some semiotic argument for why it comes first, we say that interrogating ontology is going to be more important because without like by deconstructing the static representation of ontology throughout like time, it like avoid serial policy failure in all of the impacts of genocide, which means that even if you do think that semiotics is going to come first, if you don't interrogate like the static nature of ontology, then that's like, going to make the K terminally non-solved. Okay, links. One, all the links are conceded. You can extend the app's imagination of utopian world via the all creates new specters of a future that will never be. This lost future always haunts the present. The app's imagination of a world of the all represents an active negation of the present and the past. By negating both the present and the past, the affirmation isolates itself from intersecting modes of violence that appear through spectral analysis. And a good example of this is, what was the example we read? Oh, rejecting like, okay, yeah.
Which means that they still don't link to the first two because they understand past structural analysis, like structural impacts. They do not grapple with the future or the future of the utopian
Which
vision.
means that even if they don't link to the first two, they even if they grapple with past structural impacts, they don't grapple with like future structural impacts as well. Because they have a link into the K, this means that you can't do the perm and do both, because it means that you're still you're still abiding by the static nature of ontology. On the perm, wait, oh, so yeah, okay. Extend the impacts. One, static ontology is spectral. It attempts to evade the spectra. Spectrality makes error replication inevitable, which turns the entirety of the affirmative, which means that all the impacts of genocide are going to be happening through the affirmative. The second, spectral violence proliferates genocidal logic and oppression. This is the root cause of otherization, operates via projection of spectrality onto bodies that violate the norms of kinship condition, and a condition them as ontologically dead, which probably means that it's going to be solving for the root cause of genocide that's coming out of the affirmative's impacts. But secondly, Okay, secondly, on the perm, we would say that like you do, like, okay, interrogating ontology is gonna be the prior question to gaining agency itself, which provides you with self-determination. That's gonna be the framework that goes conceded, which probably means that, the, negative is gonna come first. Wait, how is this stupid? Okay, also, on perms fail, a perm is complicit with the concealment of history as the logics of the app are contingent on the logics of the benefits of the actions that will justify death. Wait. Oh, shit.
Right, computer.
Yeah, okay, sorry. You're good. Sit for 5 minutes. Okay. What this means is that you can't buy the perm, they concede perm fails, which means that the entirety of the alt is going to be competitive. Here's how you're going to be doing the weighing on the K. When we say that on the framework debate, we're winning, that ontology is going to be a prior question, both because it determines like the self-conceptualization, but also interrogating ontology specifically is going to be uniquely good in that we don't like reach the impacts of serial policy failure, or like the genocidal and error replication impacts that the app would create. Which means that even if like semiotics does come first, you have to interrogate ontology first so that you don't replicate the impacts. Secondly, conceded links mean that we get clear links into our impacts, and it also means that they can't perm, as well as like the no perm argument as well. Yeah, okay, you can also extend that it solves the app as well, because by interrogating ontology,
It's just the B point.
okay. Okay, solves the app. You can extend this as well. The ontology of the traditional Occident is the root cause of all threats from the perspective of the international order. These threats are oriented around the ideal state of a dominant America. All current threats are the real retaliation against this ideal state and replications of the otherization that justifies genocides, which means that we're able to solve for the app, but we also have net benefits because we're avoiding the like turned impacts of like serial like policy failure and error replication that create genocide, which means that you can feel comfortable voting on the next sheet. But secondly, even if you think that like, okay, we also have the net benefit of not like relinking back into the relink on the app sheet, since they create this like, okay, wait, sorry, scratch it. We're winning on both the like in-round solvency as well as out-of-round solvency itself. One, an in-round solvency, they're like pushing out Chicano debaters out of the debate space, which probably creates more genocidal logics over time by reading this more. But secondly, on the out-of-round solvency, we're like avoiding the impacts of serial policy failure and the error replication that the app creates, which means that the like app or that the negative K is going to be solving better. Okay. Okay. On the impact weighing, say that we both link into like genocidal logics, but they concede that we're a root cause claim, which means that we're able to solve for like the actual impacts of genocide, rather than they are, but they also concede like the impact turns about how like they create error replication and serial policy failure, which means that it just comes down to a link debate. And since like our links go cold conceded, that means that we have a stronger like strength of link, which means that you can feel a lot more comfortable voting for the negative. When it comes to more proximal mole framing as well, we would say that they have a much stronger link into proximal impacts of genocide, via like the conceded warrant on the app sheet, which probably means that we're winning here too.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
You're good.
Close on a new sheet. It's be very overviewing. Is there anyone not ready? Cool. Okay.
Only two outs in the affirmative. They can only frame that semiotic hope as a triardite method, but we will answer this by saying that whiteness is a semiotic construction that is inevitable and only places semiotic deconstruction on a spectrum between whiteness and blackness. This is co-conceding, which is always going to frame the uniqueness of hollow hope within the debate space, as well as the perception that the testimony is an advocacy for La Raza that has harmed indigenous people in the past and will do so in the future within the debate space. Next is they can only go for the IBI on topicality, but we will answer this by saying that some form of assimilation to procedural rules is always going to be inevitable. That's their argument, which means you just use their own argument as defense to the IBI. Next is no link differential between how we do like how we construct like there's no brink for the IBI. Some form of assimilation is inevitable, such as like adapting to white judges for ballot modification, which looks like reading a topical version of an affirmative, which means
you can't vote on the IVI as well as TVI has some solvency is conceded, shields the links to the IVI as well. Okay, first we go to the case, understand how the framing actually worked. We will talk about the interaction between the AF and the K, but there are independent reasons on the AF, you vote them down. Which means even if you see the K as conditional, you can judge that and just vote for presumption as the affirmative is a representation that ought to be binding because it's their advocacy into the round. Whereas the methodologies by the negative are only going to be a method testing and a hypothetical testing between all bounds. That is our framing of T as a counter methodology that comes out of the MO, which means you only see those as like hypothetical tests, but the F is binding. And no articulation that representations on the negative is binding out of the affirmative means you can only buy that affirmative representations are binding coming out of the negative. No new answers there.
Concession that whiteness is a political construction of semiotic imperialism means that it constructs the uniqueness for any other semiotic try or die framing. They are going to try to tell you that there is for deconstruction. We say that specifically our warrant that Nepantla means a form of middle, which means it's always going to be on a form of spectrum. There is no ability for a third world to be created because you need to create no other form of ontology. That is going to be the ontology framing that said that there is a relationship between ourselves and the political and the beings and structures that create our own relationship with these other beings means there is no third world, no third ontological world to create a semiotic understanding of this world, which means it is always going to deck any methodology solvency for the alternative. But even if you don't buy that critical framing, you still buy that whiteness as a inevitable construction of semiotics is going to be a uniqueness and supercharges the brink of debaters' perception on your advocacy as La Raza. You only give defense that is going to be a testimonial. It's only going to be a testimonial about how race is uniquely semiotic. We agree, but it's the understanding of how your construction of semiotic race is going to be perceived by indigenous debaters. It's the saying that La Raza leads to a form of Nepantla that creates an understanding of being in the middle, the in between of whiteness and being indigenous and or black. Probably is reason why they cannot come to the middle because they have no relationship, like essentially or ontologically to whiteness. They only understand it as a form of a structural violence on top of them, which means they can never have any sort of internal solvency to create this, which means only we have a better internal link as to why you create proximal impacts for indigenous debaters. If you want to frame as an in-round proximal impacts, there's still a wash between Leilani and Max's testimonial between the links and you telling me what Chicano choice actually is. That goes conceded in some way on the links and the affirmative story, which means don't answer that, just view it as a wash.
Because of this, you buy links on the K, and the K solves F or have some outer bound solvency. Great. All right. We go start now.
All right, while I'm setting up, the order is just gonna be IBI, case, K. Obviously weighing throughout, but I will make sure I'm signposting. All right. Right. 5 minutes? Yeah. 5 minutes. 'Cause I wanna make time myself think. Okay. Is anybody not ready? Time starting. Now, this is going to be an extremely easy win for UTT HS today on 3 voting reasons. 1, you're going to vote on how we outweigh on case. 2, you're going to vote on the perm and the sequencing question. And most importantly, 3, we're going to outframe them, which is key to controlling global uniqueness in this round. And the links as well. 1, on the I bet you're going to drop that fine offense. I'm not going to come up here and defend my and like compete for my identity against you. Moving on, one on outweighing on case. We're going to outweigh on case because we control global uniqueness in this round. But more on that later whenever we go to outframing. We are going to outweigh on magnitude in this sense, meaning the outside of round impact as you're trying to put it, because we're creating a third agency in which we create new academia that works for the marginalized bodies and not against it. Second, we're going to outweigh on proximity because inside of this round that you're putting it, because it has already happened. My testimony has been shared. The conocimiento, the knowledge, the awareness of my experience and the way the being has shaped my worldview, which more on ontology later has been shared. And also, we're going to cross-apply this to probability since the third place would be created and with better methodologies, knocking out error application. And also, you're going to outweigh on time frames since cultural genocide and endless imperialist and neocolonial violence are happening right now, and we're going to create a third space and agency to solve this. Also, you're going to extend conceded solvency, how testimony is going to solve. I am not going to claim your identity, Max. I'm not going to claim anybody else's identity. I am speaking for the way that I have experienced the world and advocating for a way for all of us to gain better knowledge production and justification. 2, perm. We are now sequencing question. Is there even a risk of solvency that the affirmative can solve for harmful semiotics better than the neg? Because they can't solve for semiotics, which means that their spectrum politics are always going to be skewed. Then you're going to always skew as the negative is pure defense. And then maybe they can tell you a few reasons. Hey, maybe this is why we're not losing the round, but they can never tell you why exactly they're winning the round. Next, you're going to extend the conceded agency. DA, you do not create agency in your alternative. You just investigate our testimonies. This means that you do not reach the final, which means that we can challenge the ontological construction of whiteness that fuels imperialism. Next, judges, framework. They say that whiteness is inevitable, and that's a try or die to solve for that. However, they also cold conceded that whiteness is the driver of imperialism and colonialist justification of knowledge production and violence. This means that any risk that we can deconstruct whiteness through the third spaces we begin building in this round, which means that solvency is a try or die for the app to resolve the impact of colonialism. And they say that we create new ontologies or whatever. There is no world where we can even understand. You know what? I'm going to break this. There is no world where we can even understand our ontological perspectives without giving testimonies. And if these testimonies are our ontological perspectives, because this is the way that my being has shaped my worldview, and I'm expressing that through my testimony, we're always going to have link and access to ontology and semiotics. This is something they cannot do. We interrogate ontology in this round through my testimonial and through the producing of conocimiento. This is the only way that we can understand deconstruction through agency and self-determination. They completely conceded that ontology is constructed through demarcation, through semiotics. Semiotics is rhetoric. Semiotics is the way that we classify things, the way that we demarcate things. They cannot solve for this. Spectral politics, whatever utopia they're wanting to focus on before you even can focus on the material realities of people that are suffering right now, of testimonies that I'm explaining right now, you're always going to skew and method of people that can solve it right now. We are the only solvency method that ends demarcation through providing testimonies, through individual empowerment and agency in third spaces. Next on the links, they say that we give Max's testimony in this round. What you're going to cross-apply what I said earlier. That is not true. Chicano experiences are different, but agency and the determination of them is lost, and lost for everyone in the space when we are voice to voice experiences that aren't ours. I'm not claiming to solve for your identity. I am saying that through my way that I've perceived the worldview and through my testimony, we can create through Chicano critical theory a way to solve and create a third space. Next, on solvency, this one conceded 100%. They conceded that without understanding rhetoric and semiotics that we can't reach the third space, but they do not touch on how they say that we are hollow hope here. Sorry to move around like that, but we are not. We are our own hope, and that means that only our own ontological interrogation begins to break down whiteness and the harmful structures that semiotic produces. This creates new knowledge that solves for the ontological construction of whiteness and solves for their and solves for spectral politics or whatever. We're going to win on this because semiotics is always good.
I think any cross-application for solving ontological whiteness is a new grappling, even if it's a cross-application in the block.
No, we're gonna say that like our understanding of semiotics is that semiotics constructs ontology. So if we break down the semiotic constructions of race, then we break down like these ontological perspectives of like white or black,
And this was extended.
extended in the EMG.
That's a bad.
Yeah. Okay. I have 20 seconds remaining. Okay. Starting. Now we are our only hope of solving for this, which means that our own ontological interrogation begins to break down whiteness. We are creating new knowledge. We're creating a third space that solves for the ontological construction of whiteness. They said that this is what the debate is going to come down to. Fine, make that collapse. It's wrong anyways, and we're solving for it. We create new methods that solve for this construction. They conceded that this breaks down semiotics, and they don't mean it, and they don't do that, which means only through the affirmative can you do anything
That
from.
was a good round.
Guys.
Good
Okay.
round.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Guys, please exit the room. So I don't.